Hey everyone, Walter here. So today I want to talk about a phenomenon that I call unintended training. And there seems to be a consensus that is developed that running AI models yourself is necessarily more secure than having a third party do it for you. But I'm not necessarily so sure about that. I think all things being equal, software as a service is the most secure deployment method. And there are a lot of reasons why, but suffice to say that the ability of the provider to update the application in question is always going to be faster for a SaaS deployment model. And there are also some points that folks make advocating for self hosting AI models, suggesting that entrusting another organization with your sensitive data is always the wrong call. And this seems a little strange to me because very few companies, with some notable exceptions these days, aren't really hosting their own data to begin with. They are leveraging infrastructure as a service from hyperscale cloud providers. So, this position that you should always maintain direct custody of your own data seems a little odd. With that said, I think artificial intelligence adds a little bit of a wrinkle into the equation due to the phenomenon of what I call unintended training. And I define unintended training as whenever an AI model trains on information that the provider of this information, in retrospect, would not want it to have been trained on. This is a little bit different than sensitive data aggregation, where the in the aggregation scenario, the model would be trained on individual pieces of data that are not themselves sensitive and combined can provide or reproduce sensitive information. But in unintended training, the model is in fact trained on information that the organization in question would consider to be sensitive. So, some examples of this would include material non-public financial information, personally identifiable information or personal data if you're using the GDPR standard, or trade secrets. And this is most important where the model is trained on this data and the model is accessible to others who would not be otherwise able to view this data. So, for example, if you were using ChatGPT in the default setting, it will train on the information you provide to it, and ChatGPT is available basically to anyone. So there are some examples of this happening, and I'll get into those later. So, should a model be unintentionally trained on some sensitive data, it could conceivably regurgitate it or something similar to a party who shouldn't have access. So, some of the examples that I mentioned were, first of all, Samsung. Reportedly, earlier in 2023, some Samsung employees submitted some confidential information related to some source code as well as some internal meeting notes, while presumably, although this isn't clear from the reporting, the ChatGPT instance was in its default mode of training on the inputs. And a similar thing happened to Amazon, where reportedly some confidential data may have been provided to the model that allowed it to perform very well when answering some questions that you would give to a developer. So implying that there's some additional knowledge that the model had of Amazon's technical infrastructure that it wouldn't have otherwise. Overall, it's not really clear how big of a risk this vector represents, but since we're in the early days of generative AI, I think it's worth taking seriously. And when you're analyzing unintended training through a security lens, there are some advantages of hosting a model yourself. For example, you can control who can use the model, be it trained unintentionally or otherwise. So the mere fact that you control who uses it can reduce your risk. And then also you could potentially roll back the model to a previous version if the unintended training is so severe that you decide it's too much of risk, even though you control the model to begin with. And most commercially available SaaS options don't have either of these features, although some Microsoft Azure OpenAI offerings do give you essentially option number one, meaning that you can control who has access to the model. But aside from these two advantages of using non SaaS AI models, I think the analysis is similar to any other situation. And from a purely cybersecurity perspective, SaaS is the better way to go. Again, this is all things being equal because different situations will have different contexts, and you need to make your analysis based on the available facts. But having general rules can be helpful. And as I noted before, there are ways to mitigate the risk of unintended training when using software as a service. And like I said, you'll need to conduct a systemic risk analysis and make the call based on which is best for you. So, since precision of language is important to me, I thought it made sense to clearly label the specific issue to which people are referring when they talk about data security concerns or data leakage related to software as a service AI models. And I agree that unintended training risk is likely more substantial when you're using an AI model operated by a third party, but this is just one of the many information security challenges and business challenges that organizations need to take into account when making build versus buy decisions. So it's not the only factor to take into account, it's one of them. And as always, you should balance the risk of your planned deployment against the potential reward. And when looking at any risks, you should consider the cost of mitigating those risks as well as the risks themselves. All right, well, that's it for today, and I appreciate you taking the time to chat a little bit about unintended training with AI models. Thanks.